Hello everyone, my name is Armia, and today we are going to be taking a look at the staggering siege of Haarlem, 1572 to 1573. Oftentimes, so I'm a history nerd for the people who don't know, and oftentimes in history I find that the 15th and 16th centuries, and even the 17th to some extent, get kind of skipped over. You get, like, oh, Columbus discovers the Americas and all of that, like, shenanigans, and then it's Napoleon, like, which obviously... There's a lot of stuff that goes on in this in-between period that's really interesting and really important and shapes our world to this day. And it's a period that I really, really like and something that I want to talk about more. So that's what we're doing here today. That's really what this is. It's an excuse for me to nerd out about the 15th and 16th centuries. Because this is the period of knights with guns. This is the period of Landsknechten. This is the period of some of the coolest aesthetics as well, just from throughout history. But also some very, very interesting and strange happenings all throughout Europe and beyond. This is the period of the Italian Wars, the period of the 80 Years' War, the period of republics trying out their first go, really, in Europe ever since the ancient periods, etc. And beyond, of course, you have, like, the Americas, the Aztecs, you have the Incas to talk about. There's so much stuff, and I really wish this period got more love, honestly, because it is fascinating. Even the Sengoku Jidai over in Japan, very famous, like the Oda Nobunaga doing all this stuff. That's this period. So, like, I want to talk more about this. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the 80 Years' War and the staggering siege of Haarlem. Now, I'm actually not super familiar with the 80 Years' War myself. I know some things about it, but I'm far from an expert, so I think this will be interesting to take a look at it.
On the 18th of December, 1572, a Spanish army under Don Federico Alvarez de Toledo opened fire on the Dutch city of Haarlem.
A little context, the reason why the Spanish were fighting the Dutch was because as part of the Habsburg marriage into Burgundy, Burgundy used to control what is now Belgium and a whole bunch of pieces of what is now like Eastern France and West Germany, right? The Habsburgs married the Burgundian line. The Burgundian line died off, and the Habsburgs took over. This is why Spain becomes the ruler of Belgium, and later on, Austria takes over the rule of Belgium, and why there was basically constant fighting in this period. I think for about 200 to 300 years there was fighting here, so it's actually kind of crazy.
This marked the beginning of a siege characterized by extensive mine warfare, a naval battle on the Sea of Haarlem, the Armia, and the valiant efforts of armed citizens, including the famous Kenau Simon's Dr. Hasselaar.
Okay, I just want to mention, there's something about a matchlock that I just adore. So, you see this gun he's holding here. This is a matchlock. This is a very early model firearm. You might be familiar with the flintlock. That is basically an upgraded version of this. A matchlock literally has a trigger that when you pull it, puts a match to the powder in order to fire the bullet. It is very primitive, but it was also very important during this period. And something about them I just adore. I really do.
The stakes were high. Haarlem had thrown its lot in with the Dutch revolt, determined to free itself from the grip of Spanish rule.
Here you see, like, yeah, the Spanish owned all of this, and then the Dutch started revolting, and this turned into quite a massive war for quite a long time.
Don Federico wanted to nip this uprising in the bud by wiping out Haarlem and its rebellious inhabitants. This is how modern historiography tells the story the staggering siege of Haarlem.
Yeah. You can also see the Spanish Habsburg lands. And then, of course, you also have Austrian Habsburg, which controlled a lot of the Holy Roman Empire as well, especially towards the later years. So this is the period of the Habsburgs rule Europe in a lot of ways. Like, it's quite something.
Dutch rebels rose against their ruler, Philip II of Spain, a fervent Catholic, when Protestant resistance fighters unleashed a wave of iconoclastic fury.
Yes.
Philip opted for open confrontation.
This is called the Beeldenstorm in the Netherlands, and it was a huge event in the Netherlands and in the Dutch story, in our history, really.
He installed Fernando Alvarez de Toledo, the Duke of Alba, known as the Iron Duke, as governor of the Spanish Netherlands, and instructed him to, quote, eradicate Protestantism and disobedience through inquisition and public executions, as well as to abolish the privileges of the Dutch nobility and the autonomy of the cities and to introduce stricter taxes.
And I like the little best regards, Philip II of Spain. Please crush them completely. Thank you.
Alba was ruthless and uncompromising in fulfilling this mission. Among other things, he established the so-called Council of Troubles, a tribunal that could summon and convict anyone, regardless of rank or name, allowing Alba to eliminate enemies of his king under the guise of justice. According to some estimates, he had between 1,000 and 6,000 dissenting nobles executed and many more expropriated. Among those summoned to appear before the Council of Troubles was the leader of the rebels, one of the most powerful noblemen in the Netherlands, William of Orange.
Ah, there he is.
Known as William the Silent. After defying the summons and facing ostracism, William attempted to break Alba's iron grip by invading the Netherlands, to spark a nationwide rebellion. This offensive is often considered the first act of the 80 Years' War. But it's
kind of crazy to think about, because as far as I'm aware, he basically just went up to a bunch of, like, German noblemen and Landsknecht and just went, all right, I've got a bunch of money. You want to go invade the Netherlands? And they just kind of went, sure.
Miserable failure. William's forces were driven back, and the Dutch fight for independence seemed to be over before it had even begun. But then the famous Watergeuzen, known in English as the Sea Beggars, entered the scene. These privateers backed the rebellion, putting pressure on the Spanish by raiding ships and harbors, severely limiting their freedom of movement.
The Sea Beggars are basically just pirates. They would quote-unquote beg for money at the end of a musket, you know.
In 1572, they captured Den Briel in Holland, sparking a renewed wave of resistance. One by one, towns joined the rebels, including Haarlem, Alkmaar, and Leiden. After the Sea Beggars also...
And suddenly, there's quite a lot of issues going on for the Spanish.
...captured Middelburg. The provinces of Holland, Zeeland, and Utrecht recognized William of Orange as their stadtholder, or steward. With this newfound support, William launched a second invasion. In response, Alba mounted a counteroffensive, capturing Valenciennes before laying siege to Mons. After the Prussians surrendered on the 19th of September, the campaign shifted into a punitive mission. The Spanish captured Mechelen and brutally sacked the city in what became known as the Spanish Fury, prompting many towns in the southern Netherlands to once again swear allegiance to Alba.
Yeah, and this is also part of how Belgium came to be eventually. So, because the Spanish were in charge in the south, they were very pro-Catholic specifically, which is part of why there's still such a big Catholic, population still living here in the south, while in the north, obviously, the Protestants were a lot more common.
To restore order in the north as well, the Iron Duke sent his son, Federico Alvarez de Toledo. Don Federico sacked Zutphen, slaughtering hundreds of inhabitants, which sent shockwaves through towns in Gelderland, over IJssel and Friesland, driving them to collapse under the threat of similar brutality. He then advanced to Amsterdam, making an example of Naarden. Although the town opened its gates to him, Don Frederique gathered nearly the entire population in the church and had set it ablaze. In the days that followed,
Yeah, pretty brutal stuff, honestly.
thousands of news sheets spread the story of the Naarden massacre throughout the northern provinces. These early forms of mass media, made possible by the printing press, then just over a century old, amplified the horror.
It really does show the important, like the very unique nature of this period. This is the period of Protestantism and the printing press and just the mass spread of ideas and such. And it's interesting, you know.
The pro-independent faction seized the moment, using the massacre not only to stoke outrage, but to rally resistance. History teaches us a crucial lesson. The news had always been a double-edged sword, capable of illuminating truth, but also spreading propaganda, educating the public while simultaneously shaping opinion.
Absolutely.
By massacring...
But that's also because they're trying to sell ground news. Okay. Okay, guys. The news is a double-edged sword. That's true. Information can be shaped in all sorts of ways. That's just the truth. Anything you hear always will have a bias. Everybody has a bias. I have a bias. And that's okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with biases. It's when you let those biases rule what you think is real, basically, if that makes sense. Then it becomes a problem.
Inhabitants of a town that had already surrendered, Don Frederique went too far. Rather than further intimidating the insurgents, he transformed the rebellion into a desperate fight for survival of the cities of the northern provinces. Alba's next target was the small town of Haarlem, strategically positioned on a crucial land route between North and South Holland. By capturing it,
you can also just tell, like, look at this terrain. This is just a mess of forts and water. You can just imagine the Spanish having to conquer this. It's not easy.
To sever the rebels in North Holland from those in the south, defeating them one group at a time. When the city council of Haarlem learned that the Spaniards were advancing, the frightened council members sent a delegation to Amsterdam to negotiate with Don Frederique and beg for mercy. However, as they journeyed, Wigbold Ripperda, the governor of Haarlem, convinced the city guard to remain loyal to William.
Okay, that is one of those things that I love in history. Like, nowadays it'd be like, oh, I sent you an email sort of thing, or you know, we do a voice chat. But obviously, for most of history, you had to like physically go from point to point to talk to people. And that causes a lot of shenanigans. Like, oftentimes, like a very fun one is when Nelson was chasing Napoleon to Egypt, right? And Nelson's a really good sailor. So he's so good, he actually overtakes the French and gets there first. So he arrives at Egypt and the French aren't there. And he's like, frick, they must have gone somewhere else. Or maybe like they've already like left or something. I'll go back. So he's on the way back. He's like halfway back already because he's, again, good sailor. And then he hears, oh, Napoleon is in Egypt. It's like, oh, damn it. It's like suffering from success.
In a bold move, they overthrew the council and replaced it with citizens who, like Ripperda, refused to negotiate.
Dang, okay.
Was determined to fight for its freedom.
David and Goliath indeed. The strength of the Dutch here is definitely the fact that, I mean, look at this terrain. You can easily see, if you are at all familiar with like something like Total War or whatever, how do you take this sort of thing? You've got a ton of rivers to like consider. You've got walls. You've got like a really annoying, like a lot of splits in the terrain. It's tough. It really is.
9th of December, 1572, Don Frederique arrived near Haarlem, leading an army of 14,000 men. In stark contrast, Haarlem's garrison consisted of just 2,000 soldiers, and its defenses were clearly outdated. The city was surrounded by an 8-meter-high wall and a moat, but the fortifications dated back to the early 15th. The only modern feature was a
So these fortifications are very much still medieval. Interesting.
Positioned directly in front of the Kruisport, the eastern gate. Semicircular towers, serving as artillery platforms, reinforced the old wall at intervals of roughly 100 meters.
Okay.
Confident in his overwhelming numbers, Don Federico assumed the march to Haarlem would be a veritable walk in the park. The first
That's a mistake.
Was Lumi, whose full name was William II de la Marck, Admiral of the Sea Beggars, and Deputy Stadtholder of William of Orange in Holland. On the 13th.
Okay, I love the fact that these sea beggars apparently had an admiral. Like what?
December, he attempted to halt Don Federico's advance with 4,000 men at the Manpad, a side road between Leiden and Haarlem. However, his forces were vastly outmatched by Don Federico's seasoned troops.
Makes sense.
Spaniards opened the battle with a relentless barrage.
This is the period of the Japanese? What? The Spanish Tercio. The Japanese Tercio? What the heck? Why did I say Japanese? Anyway, no, this is the period of the Spanish Tercio. And the Spanish really were the rulers of the world, and for good reason. They knew how to do war in this period. They were very, very scary. And the Dutch taking them on was definitely considered a bit of a, there's no way this will work sort of thing. And in a way, this conflict echoes later on, because if we look at America fighting the British Empire, Britannia rules the waves. And yet, America ended up fighting and winning the revolution. So it's a really interesting kind of echo of underdogs winning their wars. Although that is far from guaranteed. There's plenty of rebellions all throughout history that get crushed underfoot without a second thought.
Maintaining their fire until Lumi's men began to falter. At that point, the Spaniards surged into close combat, routing the rebels. This defeat stunned the defenders of Haarlem so much that they offered to surrender to the Spaniards, hoping they would be spared.
Interesting.
But the Iron Duke and his son refused.
And that's a mistake. Should have just taken the surrender. You would have had Haarlem, easy peasy, no problem, no more fighting, and you've accomplished your objectives. Never try to win harder. You've already won. Don't try to win harder.
At that point, they had no choice. They owed their men several months' pay, but lacked the funds to settle the
okay, you know what, that's fair enough. That was the consistent issue that the Spanish ran into, where like they didn't have enough money to pay their troops. This happens a lot throughout this period, where like, you know, like you go to a city and the mercenaries are like, well, how about paying us? And the crown just goes, well, we don't have the money. Okay, I guess we'll just sack the city then.
The only thing keeping the troops from mutiny was the prospect of plundering Haarlem.
I guess, I mean, to be fair, considering he's already done, like, horrible things in the previous town, he could have accepted the surrender and then just started looting it. Which I realize is awful, but he's already an awful guy.
After the offer of surrender, Don Federico grew even more confident that he would quickly take Haarlem. He gave little thought to his approach, setting up a fortified camp and several gun emplacements on the flat, easily accessible terrain outside the city. When the batteries...
Interesting. I wonder why he decided to oppose this particular area rather than, for example, down here. The flat terrain is mentioned, which, okay, that makes sense. I assume this was more hilly, but I would want to avoid this fortification, personally.
Already on the 18th of December, he began a short but intense bombardment. Within 2 days, the Spanish guns were out of ammunition. Don Federico then ordered an assault.
It's funny how 2 days of bombardment is considered short. This happens in World War II as well, where like, well, we're gonna bombard the enemy for only 7 days. Like, only 7? That's quite short. It's just like the perspective is very different. Because like nowadays, an artillery bombardment would be, you fire a few shells very precisely and then you leave. But obviously, because of accuracy and blah, 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 you needed to fire a lot more shells. In World War One, the sheer amount of shells fired means that here where I live, we still pick up shells from all over the place, like on the daily.
The wall of the cruise port, which had borne the brunt of the attack. This ill-advised charge was likely a result of overconfidence, as the Spaniards met unexpectedly fierce resistance and were forced to retreat. The rapid assault had failed, and Don Federico had to pause the siege to procure more ammunition. Seizing the opportunity, William of Orange sent 600 reinforcements to Haarlem on the 9th of December. Supplies also began flowing in as the city was not fully surrounded.
That is one of those things that also makes it incredibly difficult, right? Like, they can just slip in with boats and stuff. Like, blockading this kind of port is quite difficult, honestly.
The Spanish struggled to block these shipments particularly by water. This was because the river Sparne connected Haarlem with the Haarlemmer Meer, a large floodplain where Amsterdam Schiphol Airport stands today. The sea beggars regularly brought troops, food and other supplies into the city via this route. On the 8th of January, Don Federico reported to King Philip, quote, "The city is very large, and we can do nothing to prevent the enemy from entering and leaving at will. This is the reason why they are holding out so well."
It's a little bit of an excuse because Haarlem isn't that big, but okay, like, I do see where he's getting at.
It was now clear to everyone that the siege would be anything but a swift victory.
This is the period of long sieges. I think the longest siege ever is in this period. Yeah.
The Spanish guns resumed their bombardment on the same day Don Federico wrote to the king. This time, the Spaniards focused on cutting off Haarlem's supply lines, advancing toward the city far more cautiously than they had in December, meter by meter, using approach trenches. On the 15th of January, they reached a ravine before the cruise port and occupied it without resistance. But the harsh winter began to take its toll on the Spanish army. Cold, snow and disease steadily weakened their numbers, while Haarlem's garrison grew stronger with continuous reinforcements. When Don Federico launched another assault...
I'm surprised the ravine was taken without any resistance, by the way.
On the 31st of January, his exhausted troops were met by a formidable force. 3,500 to 4,000 soldiers, 600 militia members, and over 1,000 armed citizens. Among them was a company of women led by the legendary Kenau Simonsdochter Hasselaar.
Let's go.
Kenau, nearly 50 at the time, was no ordinary citizen. She ran her late husband's shipyard and was known for her fierce temperament and refusal to back down from conflict. During the assault,
okay, love that.
she and her group hurled stones and bricks at the attackers, and even engaged in hand-to-hand combat with swords and spears. Kenau is often portrayed as a stout, stocky woman with masculine features, and to this day, a particularly domineering woman in the Netherlands might be called a ware Kenau, though as a compliment. Regardless of legend and exaggeration, what's certain is that the defenders of Haarlem united...
I do like that, actually. And it's interesting how, obviously culturally, like, because she would have been considered to have features of a man, being like very willing to go into confrontation, etc., she's likely drawn a bit more like masculine than she might have really been, which I think that's interesting to think about. Like, obviously I don't know what she looked like, right? She might have very well looked quite masculine. Who knows? Some women look masculine. But I don't know, like from a cultural perspective, I think that's really interesting. Like the what's the word I'm looking for? The attitude of the time bleeds through it, if that makes sense.
And determined, successfully repelled the second Spanish assault. This second defeat was especially bitter for the Spaniards, who made a grim discovery during their advance. The defenders of Haarlem had constructed a second line of fortifications. Behind the cruise port stood a new, sturdy wall of earth and rubble, reinforced with several bastions. Even if the outer gate fell, it would offer the attackers no meaningful advantage. Morale in the Spanish camp plummeted. One dejected captain lamented, quote, "Who would believe that we are no further than we were on the first day of the siege?"
It does make sense then why they didn't really fight over the Ravelin.
Some officers even began to advocate for abandoning the siege altogether, but Don Federique refused to hear of it. Enraged and determined to punish the city for its resistance, he vowed to make the defenders pay for his setbacks. In a grim display meant to break their spirit, he ordered a scaffold erected in front of the city walls and had his Dutch prisoners executed. The response from Haarlem was both defiant and mocking. The defenders hurled loaves of bread over the walls toward the starving Spanish troops. This bold gesture...
That's so ballsy. Okay, I do love that. Oh my god, throwing bread at your enemies to be like, oh yeah, you're starving, right? Here you go. That's really good.
Made it painfully clear that the besiegers had yet to sever the city's supply lines. The Spanish then resumed their slow, methodical advance. They extended their trench system above ground.
Okay, so now they're approaching from all different angles, which makes a lot more sense to me.
Underground. Spanish miners stuck beneath Haarlem's defenses to place explosive charges, but they frequently encountered resistance. The defenders had also started digging, using so-called countermines to intercept and neutralize the charges before detonation.
This is a very common feature of, honestly, trench warfare, even to this day to some extent. But like these kind of fights, these are like the most terrifying parts because the tunnels aren't very stable. You're digging into each other, and then as soon as you're through, maybe a lamp gets shattered, there's a fire in the corner, the light is very limited, and you're trying to kill each other. Like, it's probably some of the most horrible fighting in all of history, like, genuinely. And this kind of stuff was very, very common in sieges. Honestly, even going back to, like, Roman times, this was done.
When the two sides' tunnels met, brutal close-quarter battles erupted in the narrow, underground passages.
Yeah, you'd get stuff like just like, you're digging, oh, an explosive, boom, just stuff like that.
Camps focused on disrupting each other's supply lines. An insurgent army...
Actually, if you ever want an example of this, the movie 1917 actually features that a little bit. So that does give you a bit of an idea of what it would have been like.
Severed the Spanish connection to their headquarters in Utrecht. Sailing from Hoorn and Enkhuizen, with 24 ships across the IJsselmeer, they landed and occupied the Diemer Dike, between Myun and Amsterdam. But before the Spanish began to suffer from this disruption, loyalist troops from Amsterdam counterattacked and drove the rebels back.
Okay.
The Spanish, however, proved more effective. After blocking Haarlem's overland supply routes, they turned their attention to the waterways. In an effort to cut off replenishments via the Haarlemmer Meer, the Count of Bossu transported a fleet to the lake and launched a naval assault on the sea beggars operating there on the 26th of May, 1570.
That's crazy.
After a fierce, hours-long battle, the beggars...
Yeah. Look at this. That's crazy. Just like all these tiny boats fighting with each other. See, I want the Total War to capture stuff like this.
Conceding control of the waters to the Spanish. This defeat in the battle...
Nice detail, by the way. I don't know if you guys noticed. There's some like Spanish galleys here as well, which those were generally used in the Mediterranean, but of course would have been very useful in this kind of water as well.
Battle of the Haarlemmer Meer cut off Haarlem's last connection to the outside world. Within weeks, the city began to run out of food. The population struggled to survive, first eating whatever animals they could find, then chewing leather from shoes and belts. Finally, they began to starve. On the 8th of July, William of Orange made a final attempt to relieve Haarlem. Once again, he sent 4,000 men across the Manpad. But once again, they were repelled by the Spanish.
Yeah.
Just 4 days later.
It does show how the Spanish, in open warfare, you were not beating them. Like, it was just not happening. The Dutch do not have enough men. They are not as well trained. The Spanish are experienced and generally powerful. So yeah, like, this is, it's just not happening. It's just not happening.
On the 13th of July, 1573, Haarlem surrendered unconditionally. Don Federico promised to spare the city in exchange for 240,000 guilders in reparations. Haarlem agreed, but the son of the Iron Duke kept only part of his word. While he spared the civilian population, he executed Governor Wigbold Ripperda and the entire garrison, except for the German mercenaries, because he knew that otherwise he would not be able to recruit in their homeland.
That's true. The second you start executing mercenaries, nobody else is gonna want to work for you.
When the executioners grew weary from swinging their axes, the remaining soldiers were tied together and drowned in the river Sparne.
Yeah, pretty brutal.
Bloody revenge. The conquest of Haarlem was a Pyrrhic victory. The siege had cost the Spanish over 6 months and some 10,000 men. Rather than crushing the Dutch revolt, it had intensified resistance and proved that the Spanish were not invincible. Still, Don Federico had achieved his immediate strategic aim. Haarlem was in Spanish hands, and rebellious Holland was split in two. His next objective was its northern part, the Noorderkwartier. Soon, Don Federico marched his army toward the small but well-fortified town of Alkmaar.
And that's gonna be for next time. If you guys haven't already, do go check out Sandroman. They have some wonderful stuff, not just on this period, but honestly a lot of different periods. They are a really, really cool channel. Definitely worth checking out. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. I've been doing a bit more history stuff lately, just because, like, I find history really interesting. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, or if you'd prefer something else. I know I normally do a lot of World of Darkness, and history stuff isn't my usual focus, but yeah, I think it's really interesting. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. And of course, a very special thank you to our very important planet, still fun to say, Kane01B, and the very important planets, Aku, SCP Realized, Roselandian Rose, Torpen Only, Brandon Anderson 8516, and of course, Cool Mr. Cortez, and over on Ko-Fi, Tato, Allendog, Vreed, Ellie Cute Puppy, and of course, Alex the DM. Thank you very much for watching. Yeah, and if you want to become a member yourself and see yourself scrolling in the background, you can of course join by pressing that button down below. And if you want to subscribe, like, do all those YouTuber things, you can do that as well if you like. Please do not feel obligated to. Regardless, thank you very much for watching and have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye.